You've definitely felt it. I mean, maybe you're just sitting in like bumper-to-bumper traffic on a random Tuesday morning, right?
Oh, yeah, just staring at those red brake lights in front of you.
Exactly. Staring at the brake lights, and you get the sudden, just overwhelming urge to completely burn your current life to the ground.
Yes, just a total hard reset.
Right, and start completely over. It's this deeply human desire to reinvent yourself. And maybe you're 40 and you want to just abandon a really lucrative career.
Or maybe it's packing everything you own into like 2 suitcases and moving to a country where you literally don't even speak the language.
Yeah. Or even, I mean, it could be a quieter revolution, like finally deciding you're going to dismantle those negative, really quiet habits that have just dictated your daily routine for a decade.
Right, the internal stuff.
Yeah. But whatever the scale is, executing that massive pivot requires an immense, honestly, an almost irrational amount of courage.
Oh, absolutely.
But here is the fascinating part that we're going to get into today. When we actually try to articulate that shift, when we try to explain to our friends or our families that we are rewriting our story,
The words we reach for.
right, the English language forces us to do something incredibly strange. It forces us to talk like 19th century school children.
And like 16th century monks.
Yeah,
too.
and like actors and like sailors.
It really does. And I mean, that linguistic quirk isn't an accident at all.
Right, which is the whole mission of today's deep dive, because we are unpacking this incredible stack of linguistic notes entirely focused on the vocabulary of reinvention.
Exactly. Because when we look closely at the vocabulary we use to describe reinvention, we aren't just looking at a list of quirky, outdated metaphors.
No, it's way deeper than that.
It's a deeply ingrained psychological blueprint. I mean, the idioms we reach for when we're terrified of changing our lives.
And we are terrified.
Always. But these phrases have survived for centuries because they perfectly map onto the emotional mechanisms of how human beings process, how we survive, and ultimately how we execute major life transitions.
So we are essentially like using history's junk drawer to build a survival manual for our modern identity crises.
That is exactly it. We borrow the physical realities of the past because, honestly, the psychological reality of the present is just too abstract to handle.
Because it's invisible.
Right. You can't just tell someone to, change their internal paradigm.
Yeah, that means nothing to me. What is an internal paradigm?
Exactly. It's corporate jargon. But if you give them a physical metaphor, a really visceral image rooted in history, suddenly the brain understands the assignment.
I love that framing. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's trace this blueprint chronologically, because the absolute first step of reinventing yourself isn't actually about the future at all.
No, it's about the past.
Right. It's about severing your attachment to the past. Because you can't become someone new if you are still dragging around the corpse of who you used to be,
Yeah. You really can't. You have to drop the old titles, the previous failures, the baggage, and to use the classic phrase, you have to wipe the slate clean. Wipe the slate clean. I mean, to really grasp why this phrase is the mandatory first step of our psychological blueprint, we have to travel back to the 19th century classroom.
Okay, so take us there.
Well, we have to understand the sheer physical limitation of how information was processed before cheap paper.
And obviously, way before digital screens and iPads.
Right. School children in the 1800s did their daily lessons on small chalkboards. And these were quite literally heavy pieces of dark, rough slate stone framed in wood.
Wow. Okay. And just the tactile reality of that feels important, right? Because it's not smooth.
No, it has serious friction.
It's a literal rock. And the chalk they were using, I'm guessing it wasn't the nice, dustless, refined stuff we have today.
Not at all. It left a thick, really stubborn residue on the stone.
So it was messy.
Incredibly messy. Now, I want you to imagine a student working through a complex multi-step arithmetic problem on this slate.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
They get 3/4 of the way through the math, and they suddenly realize they carried a 1 incorrectly in the very first step.
Oh, no.
Right, the entire equation is ruined. But because of the physical nature of the slate and that messy chalk, there was no precision erasing.
You couldn't just take a little pink rubber eraser on the end of a pencil and magically, surgically remove that single incorrect number.
Exactly. You couldn't just fix the rest of the math.
So there's no backspace key, there's no undo command.
None. The mistake compromises the entire board. And to fix it, the student couldn't just brush it with their hand.
Because that would just smear it, right?
Yeah, it would just turn the whole thing into this gray, illegible cloud of dust.
So what did they do?
They had to take a thoroughly wet cloth, press it into the stone, and forcefully wash the entire surface. They had to dissolve the chalk entirely.
Wow.
And only then, once the water dried, were they left with a pure black, blank surface. They were forced by the physical limitations of their tools to start over from absolute zero.
Okay, let's map that physical act onto the psychology of an adult trying to change their life today.
Let's do it.
Because when I think of a computer, right, if my laptop's internal fan is just screaming, it's usually because I have like 80 browser tabs open.
Oh, guilty.
Right. The CPU is completely maxed out, just trying to maintain the memory of all those active sites. It feels like wiping the slate clean is the equivalent of just holding down the power button and forcing a restart. You clear the RAM.
That is a phenomenal analogy because cognitive load is incredibly real.
It really is.
When you are carrying around your past failures, your debts, your old arguments, your reputation, that is 80 browser tabs open in your brain.
Yeah, that's heavy.
Your psychological CPU is constantly running hot, just trying to maintain your current identity. So idiomatically, wiping the slate clean means intentionally closing those tabs.
It means forgiving those old debts,
There-
both the literal ones if you can, obviously, but more importantly, the emotional ones.
Yes, you have to give yourself permission to exist in the zero state.
Okay, but I have to push back here just a little bit
Go for it.
because this sounds a little bit like advocating for amnesia.
How so?
Well, if I wipe the slate clean, aren't I just running away from my problems? Because
Right.
doesn't the slate still have the physical scratches from where I pressed the chalk too hard yesterday? You can't actually erase your history.
You are absolutely right. And that's where the nuance of this blueprint comes in. Wiping the slate isn't about pretending the past didn't happen.
Okay.
The stone is still there. And as you said, the scratches from past mistakes might still be etched right into it. But the active equation that was demanding your immediate attention has been cleared.
Oh, I see.
You are removing the past from your active working memory. And the most potent example of this in the sources is the concept of geographical reinvention.
Okay. Moving to a brand new city where absolutely nobody knows your name.
Yes, the geographic blank slate.
I love that.
Think about what happens when you stay in your hometown, right? Or say you stay at the same company for 15 years.
You get locked in.
Exactly. Your environment becomes a mirror that constantly reflects your past self back to you. Your family, your old friends, your coworkers, they all hold a very specific version of your slate in their minds.
Oh, wow. So they expect you to react to stress the exact same way you always have.
Exactly. They expect you to be the exact person you were yesterday. And fighting those external expectations every single day takes an immense amount of energy.
So moving to a new city is literally washing the board.
Yes.
Because you walk into a coffee shop in Seattle, having just moved from Miami, and the barista doesn't know you dropped out of college.
Nope.
Or that you went through a brutal divorce, or that you used to be incredibly shy.
To them, you are just a person ordering a latte.
That is so freeing.
It is. The lack of pre-existing expectation is the wet cloth. It clears the environmental RAM. You don't have to spend energy fighting other people's perceptions of you.
Which frees up all that cognitive power to actually focus on who you want to be today.
Precisely.
But wait, that raises a massive problem, doesn't it?
What's that?
Because I can pack my bags, move to Seattle, and get my clean geographical slate. But if I bring all my internal neuroses, my terrible coping mechanisms, and my bad habits with me,
Oh, I see where you're going.
that pristine black slate is going to get covered in the exact same messy chalk within a week.
Yep.
Changing your zip code doesn't magically change your character.
And that is exactly why the English language doesn't stop at the slate.
Okay.
Wiping the slate clean only changes your external context, right? It gives you the space to breathe. But to change your internal architecture, you must move to the next phase of the blueprint.
Which is...
You have to turn over a new leaf.
Okay, wait. I need to pause here because this specific phrase has completely bamboozled me my entire life.
Really? How so?
Well, when you say turn over a new leaf, I guarantee you that 99% of the population, including me until literally today, pictures a tree.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone thinks of a tree.
Right. I see it like a crisp autumn day, and I picture a colorful leaf detaching from a branch and floating to the ground. Or maybe a green leaf just kind of flipping over in the wind.
Right, a botanical metaphor.
Yeah. But the history in the notes here, it's completely different, isn't it?
It is entirely different.
Yeah.
The botanical visualization is a massive, albeit very common, misconception.
So it has nothing to do with nature.
Nothing. This is not a metaphor about nature or seasons at all. It is a deeply literary metaphor rooted in 16th century technology.
Okay.
We have to look at the advent of bookbinding and the printing press.
So we're talking about books, not trees.
Correct. In the 1500s, the individual pages of a manuscript or a printed book were referred to as leaves.
Oh.
Yes. The physical sheet of vellum or paper was called a leaf.
Wow, that makes so much more sense.
It really does. Think about the physical act of reading a heavy, bound book in that era. You are staring at a leaf, a page, and it's covered in dense ink. You read the text, you absorb the story, you process all the information on that page. And when you have reached the absolute bottom, when there's nothing left to glean from that specific text, what do?
You physically take the corner of the paper and you turn over that leaf.
Yes.
And what's waiting on the other side is a blank page, a completely unwritten chapter.
Precisely. And this perfectly addresses your critique about the slate, because the slate was about erasure.
Right. Cleaning the board.
But turning the leaf is about creation. In modern psychology, turning over a new leaf refers specifically to behavioral reinvention.
So it's active.
Very active. It is the conscious, difficult choice to abandon an ingrained habit and physically write a new pattern of behavior into your daily life.
So if wiping the slate clean is like deleting the old software, turning over a new leaf is actually writing the new code.
That is exactly it. And the cognitive science behind this is fascinating.
I bet.
Because when you have a bad habit, let's say you are a chronic procrastinator who always orders takeout and watches 5 hours of television every single night.
A very relatable example for a friend.
Of course, asking for a friend. But that habit is a deeply grooved neural pathway in your brain. It's an easy paved road for your brain to travel down.
It's the path of least resistance.
Exactly. To turn over a new leaf, you can't just wish that pathway away. You have to build a competing pathway.
Okay, and the sources give a really great tangible example of this.
Yes, they do.
They describe a person who has felt physically and mentally sluggish for years, just totally stuck in a rut.
We've all been there.
Right. And turning over a new leaf isn't just sitting on the couch and saying, I'm going to be healthier tomorrow.
No, words aren't enough.
Turning over a new leaf is the jarring physical reality of the alarm clock going off at 5 a.m., lacing up running shoes in the pitch dark, and hitting the pavement.
It requires replacing the old text with new actions.
And that blank page is terrifying, isn't it? Because it requires neuroplasticity.
It does. It requires your brain to expend massive amounts of glucose to forge a brand new habit loop.
Which is exhausting.
It is. When you read the old page, you knew exactly what the characters were going to do. You knew the couch, the takeout, the TV.
It was predictable.
But when you turn to the blank page, you have to author the actions yourself, day in and day out, until the new routine actually becomes the default.
Okay, so let's check in on our blueprint. We've cleared our mental RAM with the clean slate.
Yep.
We've started writing new daily habits by turning over a new leaf. We are waking up at 5 a.m. We are doing the grueling work in private.
The foundation is set.
But eventually, you can't just run in the dark forever. Eventually, the sun comes up.
It always does.
You have to re-enter society. You have to introduce this brand new version of yourself to a world that only knew the old you.
Right.
So how do we navigate that public reveal?
That is the exact friction point where our blueprint shifts from the private sphere to the public sphere.
Okay.
And to articulate that friction, we have to leave the classroom, we leave the library, and we step directly onto a brightly lit stage.
Oh, I see.
We have to talk about entering your second act.
The theatrical metaphor, I find this one incredibly loaded.
Why is that?
Because a play is such a rigid, constructed thing.
It is. And the structure of a classic play is exactly why the metaphor works so perfectly for reinvention. Think about the first act of any traditional theater piece.
Okay.
What is its actual dramatic purpose?
It's just setup, right?
Pretty much.
The curtain goes up, we meet the protagonists, we learn what their job is, we meet their family, and we basically just find out what the central conflict or problem is going to be.
Exactly. The first act is mere exposition. The characters are largely static. They're just being positioned on the board.
Right.
But the first act always ends with a crisis or a realization that forces the curtain down.
And then intermission.
And then intermission. But when the curtain rises again for the second act, that is where the fire is.
That's where things actually happen.
The second act is the crucible. It is where the protagonist is tested, where they are forced to change, where the true, profound character development occurs.
There's a very famous, somewhat cynical quote in the notes from the American author F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Oh, yes.
He wrote, There are no second acts in American lives.
Yes, a famously pessimistic view from a man who, frankly, struggled deeply with his own trajectory.
Yeah, he had a rough time.
He was essentially arguing that in America, you get one shot at your identity, you make your money, you make your mistakes, and then you just fade out.
You're just done.
Right. You don't get to completely reinvent the narrative halfway through.
But the notes highlight something really beautiful here.
Yeah.
People today use Fitzgerald's exact vocabulary specifically to prove him wrong.
They absolutely do.
The modern cultural definition of a second act is a defiant rejection of that idea.
It is a total rebellion against the concept of a single static identity. Today, when we talk about a second act, we're usually describing a completely new, surprising, and often highly successful phase of a person's life that happens specifically after they have concluded their primary career.
It's the realization that just because you finish the exposition, the play isn't over. Exactly. The example from the sources is brilliant because of the contrast. Imagine a woman who spends 25 years as a cutthroat, high-powered corporate litigator.
Okay, very intense.
She is terrifying in the courtroom. That is her first act. That is the exposition the world knows her by.
Right.
But then she retires from law, completely pivots, and her second act is becoming a beloved, best-selling children's book author.
The contrast is exactly what makes it a second act rather than just like a hobby.
Yeah.
It completely recontextualizes her entire life.
Yeah.
It proves that the ruthless lawyer wasn't her entire identity. It was merely the armor she wore for the first part of the play.
But here is where I have to play devil's advocate again.
Great, Stu.
Because I understand the literary romance of a second act. It sounds great on paper, but practically, framing your life as a theatrical performance is profoundly intimidating.
Why do you say that? What creates the intimidation for you?
The audience. If I am in a second act, that implies there are hundreds of people sitting out there in the dark, holding playbills, just watching me.
Waiting for you to do something.
Right. And the problem is they bought tickets to see the corporate lawyer. Now I'm standing on stage holding a children's book.
Yeah.
The imposter syndrome would be paralyzing.
You really would be.
Conceptualizing your reinvention in the privacy of your own home is easy, but stepping out from behind the curtain, under the literal spotlight, knowing people are judging whether you are going to succeed or fail at this new thing, that doesn't feel like a play to me.
What does it feel like?
That feels like stepping off a cliff.
That is an incredibly astute observation. The anticipation of the audience's judgment creates a massive psychological barrier.
Huge.
It induces a literal fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And the English language recognizes this terror perfectly.
It does.
Yes. It doesn't just leave us on the stage. To transition from the idea of changing to the reality of changing, the blueprint forces us to confront the physics of commitment.
Oh, boy.
We have to talk about what it actually means to take the plunge.
Oh, man. Take the plunge. Just saying those 3 words makes my stomach drop. It is such a visceral, physical phrase.
It should make your stomach drop because it bypasses the intellect completely and goes straight to the amygdala.
Pure fear.
Pure fear. The sources paint a very specific, undeniable picture for this idiom. And I want you to close your eyes and imagine the physical scenario.
Okay, I'm imagining it.
You have hiked up a mountain and you are standing at the absolute edge of a sheer cliff.
Okay.
70 feet below you is a deep, dark, freezing cold alpine lake.
My palms are sweating just processing the geometry of that. 70 feet is high.
It is very high. And you don't just walk up to the edge and immediately jump. No one does that.
No way.
You stand there with your toes hanging over the rock. Your heart is hammering against your ribs. You're looking down at the water and you're hesitating.
Just frozen.
You might stand there for 10 agonizing minutes. You are calculating the risk. You are feeling the cold wind. You are listening to the voice in your head screaming, "This is a terrible idea. Just step back. You don't have to do this."
Because right up until the moment your feet leave the rock, you still have 100% agency.
Exactly.
You can still abort the mission. You can just walk back down the mountain.
Exactly. You are in the agonizing purgatory of choice. But then, after all that hesitation, you stop calculating. You bend your knees. You close your eyes. And you push off the rock. You take the plunge.
Wow. Let's talk about the physics of that split second, because to me, this is where the analogy becomes profound.
Let's do it.
Taking the plunge isn't just about the water at the bottom. It's about surrendering to gravity.
Yes.
You can stand on the edge of the diving board or the cliff doing the math forever, calculating the trajectory, checking the wind resistance, whatever. But the moment you jump, your agency drops to 0.
Absolute 0.
You cannot change your mind in midair. You can't hit a backspace key. Taking the plunge is the moment you relinquish the illusion of control and surrender to the momentum of your choice. You are no longer deciding to change, you are falling toward the new reality.
Relinquishing the illusion of control is a brilliant way to phrase the psychology here.
Thank you.
In life, to take the plunge means to finally execute a massive, terrifying decision after a long period of chronic hesitation.
Right.
The sources give a perfect, mundane, yet terrifying example.
Let's hear it.
Talk about opening a bakery.
Right. We all know someone who has been standing on the cliff edge of their hypothetical bakery for 5 years.
Exactly. For 5 years, they've been baking sourdough on the weekends, telling all their friends how much they hate their accounting job.
Looking up commercial ovens on the internet.
Right, looking at the water below and saying, man, I'd love to jump in there. But researching isn't jumping.
No, it's not.
Taking the plunge is the Tuesday morning when they walk into their boss's office, hand in their resignation, drain their savings account, and sign a 5-year ironclad commercial lease on a storefront.
It's the point of no return.
It's the absolute severing of the safety net. But we must ground this romantic metaphor in reality. Because what happens after gravity pulls you down? What happens when the free fall ends?
You hit the freezing cold water.
You hit the water,
Yeah.
and the shock of the cold takes your breath away.
Yeah.
You realize you have to swim to survive.
Right.
You paddle frantically to the store. You drag yourself onto the rocks, and you sit there shivering. And suddenly, the adrenaline completely evaporates.
The fun part is over.
The thrill of the jump is over. The romantic narrative of quitting your job is gone. Now, you were just soaking wet on solid ground.
Just cold and wet.
And this is the cruelest part of the blueprint. Taking the plunge was actually the easy part.
Wow.
Now, the unglamorous, agonizingly slow work of reality begins. You have to dry off, and you have to build from the ground up.
The romantic part is definitely over. Now we are just staring at the mud.
Lots of mud.
So let's dig into the construction metaphor. Building from the ground up.
This metaphor hinges on a very stark strategic contrast regarding how we approach work and life. Think about the difference in difficulty between taking over an existing structure versus creating a new one.
Okay, give me an example.
Let's say you buy a massive pre-existing skyscraper.
Okay, I have a skyscraper.
If you buy a skyscraper, the heavy, invisible lifting has already been done for decades. The deep subterranean foundation is already set in the bedrock. The massive steel framing is in place. The plumbing works. The electricity flows.
The bones are good.
Exactly. You might walk in and decide the lobby looks dated. You might tear down some drywall, fire some staff, change the wallpaper, and rebrand it. It takes work, yes, but the structure is fundamentally supporting you.
But that's not reinvention, that's just redecorating. You are retrofitting an old reality.
Exactly. Reinvention is not buying the skyscraper. Reinvention is buying an empty, overgrown plot of dirt.
Just a vacant lot.
There is no foundation. There is no framing. There is no plumbing. Before you can even think about the wallpaper, you literally have to rent a backhoe, take a shovel, and dig a massive hole into the soil yourself.
So idiomatically, building from the ground up means starting a business or a relationship or a new identity from absolute unmitigated zero.
Absolute zero. It means you possess no pre-existing infrastructure to lean on. In a business context, it means you have no legacy code, no inherited client list, no brand recognition, and no institutional memory.
The sources highlight 2 very distinct examples of this, which I think really show the breadth of the phrase.
You do.
First, they describe building a software empire without inheriting a wealthy parent company.
Right.
You aren't stepping in as the nepotism CEO of a firm with $100 million in revenue. You are sitting in a freezing garage, writing the very first line of code, trying to figure out how to incorporate an LLC on LegalZoom.
Exactly.
And the second example is a group of local volunteers building a community library in a marginalized neighborhood where absolutely no public services existed before.
Both examples share the exact same core truth. When you build from the ground up, the progress is initially invisible.
Yeah, that makes sense.
When you are digging a foundation, you're working below ground level. You pour the concrete, and to the outside world, you still just have a hole in the dirt.
People walking by just see a mess.
They do. It takes months or years of grueling labor before the structure even breaks the surface where other people can see your progress.
Which brings us to the psychological toll of this phase. Because when you are in the hole, covered in mud, trying to figure out how to pour concrete, you have to confront something very uncomfortable about yourself.
What's that?
You have to admit how much you don't know.
Yes. Because you are starting at zero, You must embrace the absolute, humiliating reality of being a beginner again.
It's humbling.
Very. Which leads seamlessly to the next crucial phrase in our linguistic stack. While you are covered in the mud of the foundation, you must simultaneously learn the ropes.
Learn the ropes. Okay, so we are leaving the construction site and we are heading out to the high seas.
We are. This idiom is a direct import from the era of traditional historical sailing ships, the massive galleons and clippers of the 17th and 18th centuries.
Okay.
And to understand why this is a metaphor for humility, you have to conceptualize the sheer staggering complexity of those vessels.
Because they didn't have a steering wheel and a throttle like a modern motorboat, right?
Not at all. These were massive wooden structures, entirely powered by capturing the invisible force of the wind.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. And they captured that wind using a labyrinthine system of massive canvas sails, all of which were controlled by literal miles of complex intersecting ropes, pulleys, and rigging.
Miles of ropes. It must have looked like a massive spider web.
It did. Now imagine a brand new, inexperienced sailor stepping onto the deck of this ship for the very first time.
Okay.
No matter how strong they were or how smart they thought they were practically useless.
Just dead weight.
Completely. They could not contribute to navigating or surviving the ocean until they had memorized the exact function of every single rope. If the captain yelled a command to adjust the mainsail during a storm and you pulled the wrong rope,
The sail collapses, the mast snaps, or you steer the ship directly into a reef.
Exactly.
The stakes of ignorance were literal life and death.
Exactly. So the learning curve was steep and unforgiving. The rookie had to literally learn the ropes.
And today, we use the phrase in a much safer context.
Yes. Thankfully.
We use it to mean navigating the early stages of understanding the basic protocols, the rules and the unwritten procedures of a new job or a completely new industry.
Right.
But I want to linger on the emotional reality of this for a second, because I think the casual way we use the phrase today masks how painful the process actually is.
Oh, absolutely.
Think about the psychological hurdle this demands from an adult. It requires a massive, incredibly painful surrender of the ego.
How so? Walk me through the psychology there.
Well, let's go back to our earlier examples. The notes mention a senior finance manager.
Okay.
Let's say this person is 50 years old. In their first act, they were at the absolute top of the food chain. They were making multi-million-dollar decisions, managing a team of hundreds, universally respected in their field.
The master of their domain.
Right. Their ego is heavily armored by their competence. But then they take the plunge. They decide their second act is graphic design.
A total pivot.
How incredibly humiliating is it for that senior executive to walk into a design studio as an intern and have to ask a 22-year-old how to use the basic functions of Adobe Illustrator?
It is agonizing. It is the state of conscious incompetence. You are painfully aware of how bad you are at the new task.
Yes.
And you're absolutely right. This is the exact friction point where most reinventions fail.
Really?
Yes. It is why so many people refuse to take the plunge in the first place. They cannot stomach the ego death of returning to the bottom of the hierarchy.
Because your brain just screams, "Do you know who I am? I used to be a VP."
And the brutal truth of the ship is, in this new industry, you are nobody.
You are the useless sailor.
Exactly. The fact that you were a genius in finance means absolutely nothing when you are trying to understand color theory or typography. If you cling to your past title, if you refuse to admit you don't know which rope to pull, this ship sinks. You must physically and mentally set your past authority aside.
You have to be okay with asking the dumb questions again. You have to be okay with writing sloppy code or burning the first batch of croissants or making massive mistakes on your brand new slate.
You cannot fake knowing the ropes. You can't bluff your way through the rigging during a storm. You just have to put your head down, accept the humiliation of being a novice, and put in the thousands of hours to learn the system, knot by knot.
But this brings up a massive existential question.
Which is?
Digging in the freezing dirt to build a foundation from scratch, memorizing miles of complex ropes, surrendering your hard-earned ego to a 22-year-old, it sounds utterly exhausting.
It is.
It sounds like psychological torture. Why on earth do we willingly put ourselves through it? If the process of the second act is this grueling, why not just stay in the comfortable skyscraper of the first act?
Because the underlying fuel source has completely changed.
What do you mean?
In your first act, in the skyscraper, you might have just been running in the rat race. You were working for a paycheck, climbing a corporate ladder that someone else built, motivated by societal expectations.
Doing what you were supposed to do.
Right. But when you willingly endure the mud and the ropes of your second act, it's because you have tapped into a vastly more powerful internal energy source. You endure the pain because finally you are finding your calling.
Finding your calling. That phrase always sounds so grand.
It does.
It sounds almost magical, like something out of an Arthurian legend.
It does. And there's a deeply historical, deeply spiritual reason for that weight. The concept of a calling isn't a modern HR buzzword.
No.
No, it originates from the word vocation. And vocation is derived directly from the Latin word vocare, which translates literally to call.
Okay, vocare. So it's an auditory metaphor.
Yes, but originally a very specific type of audio. Historically, centuries ago, a calling was not about taking a career aptitude test to see if you'd be a good accountant. It was a theological concept. It was the belief that a literal divine voice, a higher power, was speaking directly into your soul, giving you an undeniable mandate from the universe regarding your exact purpose on Earth.
Wow.
It wasn't a choice. It was a cosmic assignment.
So if we strip away the theology for a moment, how do we translate that divine mandate into modern psychological terms? Because I assume most people changing careers today aren't hearing a booming voice from the clouds telling them to open a coffee shop.
No, the modern translation is about internal alignment rather than external revelation.
Okay, break that down.
In modern psychology, finding your calling means discovering the specific intersection where your deepest, most authentic passions perfectly match your inherent talents and applying that to a need in the world.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
It is the ultimate state of flow. We often describe it casually as work that doesn't feel like work.
The sources give two beautiful, grounded examples of this alignment.
Let's hear them.
First, they talk about a highly paid software salesperson who abandons their commission checks to go back to nursing school.
That's a huge shift.
Right. The sales job paid the mortgage, but it was just a job. Nursing, despite the grueling hours and lower pay, is the calling.
Exactly.
And the second example is someone realizing that standing in a chaotic classroom teaching third graders isn't just a way to earn a living. It is the fundamental reason they were put on the earth.
And when you find that alignment, when you experience that modern day vocare, it completely changes your relationship to the struggle we just talked about.
Because it's worth it now.
Yes. Suddenly, the ego death of learning the ropes isn't a chore, it's a joy. Because you realize you are finally climbing the rigging of the right ship.
Oh, I love that.
Which brings us to the final beautiful synthesis of our psychological blueprint.
The ultimate destination.
Yes. Once you find that true calling, your role fundamentally shifts. You're no longer just a deckhand scrambling up the rigging, trying to memorize someone else's ropes.
Yeah.
You become the captain. And as the captain of your own life, you must pick up the tools and chart a new course.
Chart a new course.
Yeah.
We are closing out this blueprint with one final nautical metaphor, and the imagery of this one might be my absolute favorite.
It is incredibly powerful because it is entirely about agency. To fully appreciate it, we have to look at the reality of oceanic navigation before the invention of GPS.
Okay.
Before satellites existed to effortlessly triangulate our position on a glowing screen.
Right. You are in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean in 1750.
Yeah.
All you see is water in every direction. There are no street signs.
Exactly. You were surrounded by a void. To figure out where the ship was going to sail, navigators had to rely on physical paper maps.
Yeah.
They had to take a compass, a ruler, and a pen, and they had to physically draw lines across the paper.
Wow.
They had to literally chart a course across vast, terrifying, and sometimes completely undocumented waters.
So idiomatically, charting a new course means deliberately and proactively planning a transformative direction for your future. You are no longer just letting the ocean currents push you around. You are choosing the specific longitude and latitude of your destination.
You are initiating a completely new reality through an act of sheer will. The sources give a great modern business example here.
What is it?
Tech founders. Let's say their first startup spectacularly failed. It went bankrupt. Their slate was wiped violently clean by the market.
A forced clean slate.
Yes. But they don't give up. They sit down in an empty room, they analyze the wreckage, they grab the metaphorical pen, and they deliberately chart a completely new course toward a different technology.
And on a more intimate, personal level, the notes mention a couple who wakes up one day and realizes they are utterly suffocated by the frantic, keeping up with the Joneses lifestyle of the city.
A very common feeling.
Right. And they decide to chart a new course by selling everything, packing up the car, and moving to a quiet plot of land to farm.
What both of those examples share is the reclamation of self-determination. You are deciding what the rest of the map looks like.
That's why I love the imagery so much. It perfectly captures the shift in power. When you are just learning the ropes, you are a passenger hoping the captain knows where the ship is going.
Exactly.
But when you chart a course, you are holding the pen. You are choosing your own destiny, even if it means sailing into a storm.
And if we pull the lens all the way back, it perfectly connects to the very beginning of our blueprint. It closes the loop entirely.
Oh, how so?
Think about it. Why did you take that wet cloth and wash the chalk dust off the slate in the first place?
To get a clean surface.
You wiped it clean, specifically so that you would have the blank space to draw your own map. You endured the terror of turning over the new leaf, so that you would finally have an empty page to chart that exact course upon.
Oh, wow.
Every single idiom was preparing you for this exact moment of agency.
Okay, let's take a breath and look at the incredible, exhausting, beautiful journey we just went on with these phrases.
Quite a trip.
We started in the 19th century classroom, scrubbing the stubborn chalk dust off our heavy slate stones to forgive our past mistakes and lower our cognitive load.
Right.
We opened the heavy 16th century tomes and physically turned over new vellum leaves, forging new neural pathways to change our daily habits.
Yes.
We stepped out of the shadows and onto the brightly lit stage to defy the world's expectations with our surprising second acts.
Defying the critics.
We stood terrified on the edge of the cliff, hearts pounding in our chests, and finally surrendered to gravity, taking the plunge into the freezing water of commitment.
The point of no return.
We dragged ourselves to the muddy shore and dug our hands into the dirt to build our dreams from the ground up without a safety net.
Digging that foundation.
We crushed our own egos on the high seas to learn the complex, tangled ropes of our new lives. And finally, after hearing the internal, undeniable call of our true vocation, we picked up the pen and charted our own deliberate course across the ocean.
It is a phenomenal, rigorous progression. And I want to remind you, the listener, why having this specific historical vocabulary matters so much.
Right. Why does this matter?
Because mastering these phrases isn't just about sounding eloquent or, winning a trivia night. It gives you a tangible, conceptual architecture for your own life choices.
It gives you a survival manual.
Yes. When you feel the paralyzing terror of quitting your job, knowing the historical physics of the phrase "take the plunge" normalizes that fear.
It makes it okay to be scared.
Exactly. It reminds you that the 10 minutes of hesitation on the cliff edge isn't cowardice, it's just the necessary preamble to the jump.
Wow.
Knowing you have to learn the ropes normalizes the humiliating frustration of being a beginner again. It reminds you that your ego is the enemy of your education.
That's a great way to put it.
This vocabulary highlights the profound, painful maturity required to stop being a passive character in your own first act and finally take the pen to write the second.
It is so incredibly empowering. But as we wrap up this deep dive into the language of reinvention, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Okay.
Something that builds on everything we've unpacked today. We spent this entire hour talking about the anxiety of filling the blank spaces.
Yes, we did.
We talked about writing new habits on the blank leaf, pouring concrete into the empty dirt, and drawing deliberate, precise lines on the map to chart a very specific new course.
Filling it all in.
But think about this. What if the true power of charting a new course isn't just in the specific final destination you choose? What if the ultimate act of courage isn't filling the map, but intentionally leaving some vast areas of your life completely uncharted?
Oh, wow.
When you finally take the pen, what might you discover about yourself if you allow for the terrifying beauty of the blank spaces?
That is a brilliant, unsettling question to end on. The uncharted waters are where the true, unpredictable magic happens.
Exactly. Sometimes the best plan is leaving room for no plan at all. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the language of reinvention. We hope you feel inspired, conceptually equipped, and maybe just a little bit braver about whatever second act you are standing on the cliff edge dreaming up.
Keep learning, embrace the humility of the beginner's mind, and we will see you next time.
Take care, everyone.
So I want you to picture this. It's the year 1519.
Okay, 1519.
Yeah. Hundreds of exhausted, just completely terrified soldiers are standing on the pristine sand of a totally foreign beach.
Right.
And they're watching their own commander deliberately set fire to their only ship's home.
It's just such an intense, almost unbelievable historical moment.
I mean, imagine the visceral panic of that. The smell of burning timber and pitch mixing with the salt air, the heat radiating against their faces.
Yeah, they're standing on the edge of an unknown hostile empire.
Exactly. Vastly outnumbered. And they are watching the only wooden vessels capable of returning them to their families, to safety, to civilization, just simply turn to ash and sink into the surf.
And the thing is, he didn't do it to destroy his men. He did it because he understood a terrifying, just an absolute truth about the architecture of human courage.
And the psychology of massive change.
Exactly. It's one of the most extreme historical examples of forcing human adaptation. And it really cuts straight to the core of what we are unpacking today in this deep dive.
Because we love the romanticized version of change, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it is incredibly easy for you, the listener, to sit on your couch on, say, a random Tuesday night, just staring at the ceiling, dreaming of completely blowing your life up in the best way possible.
Right, like moving across the globe or, I don't know, abandoning a safe career to finally pursue that calling that keeps you awake at night.
Yeah, in the mind, that dream is pristine. It's like this beautifully crafted cinematic trailer where you are the triumphant star of your own reinvention.
But the dream is always frictionless.
Always.
Because the moment you actually take action, the second you hit send on that resignation email or you sign the mortgage papers in a new city or hand over your life savings, that cinematic music just screeches to a halt.
The romance evaporates instantly.
Instantly. You are suddenly standing on your own foreign beach, watching your safety burn, surrounded by completely unknown, deeply uncomfortable territory.
And that is exactly what we're exploring today. We are looking past the fantasy of change and digging directly into the psychological mechanics of the transition itself.
Right. Our source material today is phenomenal. We've got these notes from an advanced English masterclass on the art of reinvention.
Yeah, and we are specifically examining how the English language has constructed this highly evolved, deeply visceral vocabulary to articulate this exact period of chaos.
Because language is never an accident, right?
No, never. It acts as a mirror for our internal human experience. When we look closely at the phrases we use to describe a massive life pivot, we find that we don't use gentle, comforting words.
We really don't.
We borrow intense life or death imagery from military conquests, from dangerous early aviation, and from the harsh realities of physical exertion. We use extreme physical metaphors to make sense of our own internal psychological chaos.
Which makes this conversation the ultimate survival guide for the transition phase of life.
I completely agree.
If you are navigating a massive shift, or even just contemplating one, these concepts are the tools you need to build a framework for your own mind. It prevents you from feeling entirely consumed by the chaos.
So let's start at the absolute beginning of any reinvention.
Right, phase one.
You have made the decision. You have left safety behind. The very first psychological space you enter is one defined by the total absence of a foundation. We describe this as diving into the deep end.
The deep end. It's such a common phrase, but when you really think about it.
Think about the physical architecture of a swimming pool and how perfectly it maps onto human psychological development.
Okay, yeah.
When we learn to swim, we are placed in the shallow end. The shallow end is a manufactured environment of total control.
Because your feet can firmly touch the concrete floor.
Exactly. You can feel the water, you can practice the mechanics of moving your arms, but gravity and the solid ground are always there to support you. It represents the known world.
Like your current job, your current routine, your established social circle.
Right. But the deep end of the pool is a completely different dimension.
It's terrifying.
The defining characteristic of the deep end isn't just that there is more water, it is the terrifying realization that you cannot touch the bottom. The foundation has vanished.
So when we say someone has decided to dive straight into the deep end, we're talking about a person who intentionally enters a highly complex, demanding new environment with zero gradual preparation.
Yes, and from a neurobiological standpoint, diving into the deep end forces the brain into an immediate state of hyper-adaptation.
Oh, interesting. How so?
Well, when you can no longer touch the bottom, the mammalian survival instinct overrides the executive function's desire for comfort. You are creating a literal biological sink-or-swim scenario.
You remove the option of stillness.
Exactly. The environment demands immediate complex action, or you will drown in the complexity of your new surroundings.
The source material gives this great example. Consider the scenario of someone deciding to pack up their entire life and move to Tokyo.
Oh, that's a perfect example.
Right. Now, the logical, comfortable way to do this would be to wade into the shallow water first. Yeah, you download a language app.
You take evening classes for a year.
Yeah, you watch documentaries. You keep your current day job while slowly testing the temperature of Japanese culture.
But the person who dives into the deep end skips all of that.
They just buy the ticket.
They buy the ticket, land in Tokyo with zero vocabulary, and force themselves to navigate the subway system and order food on the street in real time.
Which, I mean, the cognitive load of that Tokyo scenario is astronomical.
Oh, it's completely overwhelming. Your brain is bombarded with sensory information it cannot decode. The neon signs mean nothing. The ambient conversations sound like static, and the social rules are entirely foreign.
It requires an immense capacity to tolerate being completely overwhelmed. But I have to challenge the wisdom of this, though.
Okay, go ahead.
Is diving actually a superior method of reinvention? Because, I mean, from an evolutionary perspective, intentionally throwing yourself into a high-stress, high-danger environment without preparation just seems incredibly reckless.
It does seem that way, yes.
If wading allows you to learn the mechanics of swimming while still being able to stand up and catch your breath, why would anyone choose the pure panic of the deep dive?
It is a profound question, and it highlights the friction between logical safety and radical transformation. Wading is undoubtedly more comfortable.
Much more.
But wading contains a hidden trap. You always have the option to step back onto dry land.
Oh, wow.
When you take the evening language class while keeping your safe corporate job, your brain knows that the new skill is optional. The stakes are artificial.
So when Japanese grammar gets too difficult,
You can just close the textbook and go back to your comfortable life.
so the safety net actually prevents the rewiring of the brain.
Precisely. Radical adaptation often requires massive, undeniable stakes. By diving into the deep end, you bypass the friction of hesitation. Your brain recognizes that this is no longer an intellectual exercise. It is a survival requirement.
So the neural pathways form faster.
Yes, the cultural immersion is total, and the adaptation happens at an accelerated rate because the environment absolutely demands it. You don't learn the language to pass a test. You learn it to eat.
To eat. Wow. Okay, so you are in the deep end, the water is over your head, the cognitive load is spiking, and you are desperately trying to tread water.
You are utterly unprepared.
Right. You have no manual for this new life. So how do you actually navigate when you have no data to guide you?
This brings us to a wildly evocative concept in our language: the necessity of flying by the seat of your pants.
I love this phrase.
It's brilliant. But to truly grasp the weight of this phrase, we have to strip away our modern expectations of technology. We have to look back to the terrifying reality of early aviation in the 1920s and 30s.
Which is such a brilliant contrast to how we operate today. Because we live in a society completely paralyzed by a demand for perfect data.
We really do.
If I need to drive 10 minutes across town, I have a satellite in space beaming real-time traffic updates, speed trap alerts, and weather patterns directly to a glowing screen on my dashboard.
Exactly.
We are conditioned to believe that we cannot make a single move without a comprehensive, peer-reviewed data set predicting the outcome.
And that modern luxury makes the reality of early pilots almost incomprehensible. I mean, imagine strapping yourself into a primitive machine built of canvas, thin wood, and vibrating metal.
No thanks.
Right, you are soaring thousands of feet in the air. There are no complex onboard computers. There is no radar.
None.
If you fly into a heavy cloud bank or a sudden storm, you are instantly stripped of your visual horizon. You are effectively blind.
So if you are in a cloud and you can't see the ground, how do you even know if the plane is flying straight? Like, how do you know if you're subtly tipping downward into a fatal dive or if the engine is losing power?
You have to bypass the intellectual desire for visual data and rely entirely on the body's physical sensory input.
You literally feel it.
Yes. Those early pilots had to literally feel the mechanical health and the trajectory of the aircraft through their own bodies. They felt the subtle shifts in gravity, the change in the engine's vibration, and the tension of the aircraft's momentum directly through the physical seat of their pants, pressing against the pilot's chair.
That is wild.
Their central nervous system became the instrument panel.
The raw intuition of the physical body overriding the lack of intellectual data. So when we apply this idiom to modern life, to say someone is flying by the seat of their pants, means they are navigating a highly complex, potentially disastrous situation using only their gut instinct.
Their intuition and their raw reactive capability. They are making monumental decisions in real time without a formal plan.
It is the ultimate rejection of analysis paralysis.
Think of a founder launching a business startup in its very first year.
Oh, perfect example from the text.
They don't have a 5-year corporate strategy or a meticulously researched market projection. A major supplier falls through on Tuesday, a competitor launches a rival product on Wednesday, and the payroll software crashes on Thursday.
There's no dashboard to consult for that.
There isn't. They have to feel the vibration of the crisis and manually adjust their altitude on the fly, relying entirely on their instinctual judgment.
It grants us this incredible, liberating permission to trust our internal compass.
Yeah.
When you're deep in the chaotic transition of a reinvention, you cannot wait for the perfect moment.
You can't.
You cannot wait for a guarantee of success. You have to tune into the vibration of the situation and trust your reactive instincts. But let's be honest about the biological toll here.
Oh, the toll is massive.
Flying by the seat of your pants, relying constantly on high alert intuition, is a state of perpetual adrenaline.
The cortisol levels are through the roof. The amygdala, which is the fear center of the brain, is firing constantly.
Exactly. And human biology cannot sustain that level of acute stress indefinitely. If you are constantly treading water in the deep end and constantly flying blind through a storm, your biology is going to scream at you to seek safety.
It wants homeostasis.
Right. The overwhelming temptation will be to land the plane, to swim back to the shallow water, and to abandon the reinvention entirely, because the psychological cost of the transition is simply too high.
Which brings us to phase 2 and the exact historical moment you described at the very beginning of our conversation.
The boats.
How do you prevent the human mind from surrendering to its own survival instincts when the panic becomes unbearable? You have to artificially remove the option of surrender. You have to commit the ultimate act of psychological constraint. You must burn your boats.
Okay, let's draw a very stark, very necessary line in the sand right here, because we are not talking about burning bridges.
A vital distinction, a very common confusion, but they are totally different.
Burning bridges is a destructive interpersonal act. It is, throwing a tantrum on your last day of work, insulting your manager, and ensuring you can never return to that specific company.
It is an act of anger that limits your network.
Burning your boats, however, is an act of calculated self-manipulation.
It is the intentional, strategic destruction of your own avenues of retreat. When Hernán Cortés ordered his men to burn their ships in 1519, he wasn't doing it out of malice.
He wasn't just being crazy.
No, he was executing a profound psychological strategy based on his understanding of human weakness.
Because if those ships had remained anchored in the bay, what would have happened the moment the first battle turned bloody? Or the moment a disease swept through the camp?
The men would have fled.
Instantly.
When the human brain is presented with a terrifying obstacle, and it knows that a safe, comfortable alternative exists, it will inevitably divert cognitive energy toward planning an escape.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Psychologists actually refer to this as the cognitive load of a plan B. If you know you have an escape hatch, you only commit, say, 80% of your energy to fighting the battle. The other 20% is subconsciously packing your bags for the retreat.
Wow. So by setting fire to the ships, Cortés eradicated the 20% drain.
He forced a singular, inescapable reality upon his men. We conquer this new world, or we die in the sand. There is no third option. The psychological mechanism of artificial necessity is triggered.
If we map this onto the modern journey of reinvention, burning your boats looks like the aspiring restaurateur who empties their entire life savings into a commercial lease, right?
Exactly. Knowing unequivocally that if the restaurant fails, they face total financial ruin with no corporate safety net to catch them.
Or the person who publicly announces their career pivot to their entire industry, staking their professional reputation on the success of the new venture.
Yes.
But I have to push back on this, though.
Okay, let's hear it.
Because it sounds dangerously close to survivorship bias. I mean, we celebrate the people who burned their boats and built empires. We do not hear from the people who burned their boats and ended up bankrupt, starving on the metaphorical beach.
That's true. We usually don't.
Right. And in a world that preaches the virtues of emergency funds, diversified income, and prudent backup plans, telling someone to intentionally destroy their safety nets feels reckless. Isn't a measured, calculated risk fundamentally smarter?
From the perspective of pure financial or physical preservation, yes, having a backup plan is always safer. But the framework we are exploring in this deep dive isn't about safety.
It's about mastery.
Exactly. The argument here is that certain levels of extraordinary transformation are completely incompatible with a safety net. The presence of the net softens the jump.
It gives you an out.
When you burn the boats, you manufacture an existential necessity to win. You unlock reserves of creativity, endurance, and sheer willpower that are neurologically inaccessible when your brain feels safe.
You are forcing your own evolution by making failure fatal to the old identity.
Yes.
And once those goats are ashes and the escape route is gone, your entire orientation to the world fundamentally shifts. You can no longer look out at the ocean dreaming of home. You have to turn your back on the water and face the dense jungle of your new reality.
Which leads us to the geometry of profound change.
Doing a 180.
The necessity of doing a 180. This is where the internal psychological shift becomes an external observable reality. Let's look at the mechanics of this geometric metaphor.
Okay.
On a compass, a 90-degree turn is a pivot. If you are facing north and turn east, your perspective changes, but you are still moving in a somewhat adjacent trajectory. It is an adjustment.
Right, like a 90-degree turn is taking your marketing degree and moving from a tech company to a healthcare company. It's different, but the core mechanics of your identity remain largely intact.
Exactly. But a 180-degree turn is an absolute uncompromising reversal. You are turning entirely around to face the exact opposite direction. You are heading south instead of north.
Total reversal.
In the context of human behavior, doing a 180 represents a total repudiation of your former trajectory.
The psychological weight of this is staggering because it forces a confrontation with the sunk cost fallacy. To truly do a 180, you have to look at the years you spent walking north. The money invested in a specific degree, the time spent climbing a specific corporate ladder, the identity you built around a certain set of beliefs.
And you have to admit out loud, that was the wrong direction for me.
Which is an ego-shattering admission.
It requires the death of the old self.
Right.
Think of someone who spent their entire 20s embodying deep cynicism, perhaps avoiding responsibility, mocking ambition, and just kind of drifting through life.
We all know someone like that.
Right. To do a 180 in their 30s and become deeply driven, fiercely optimistic, and dedicated to building something meaningful isn't just a change of habit. It is a complete ideological reversal.
They are acting in direct opposition to their former identity. Or, like the text mentions, consider a legacy company that is bleeding money because they refuse to adapt to the digital age.
Yes, great business example.
A new CEO comes in and doesn't just tweak the product line. They completely dismantle the analog infrastructure, abandon their traditional demographic, and do a 180-degree pivot to become a software as a service company.
It's terrifying.
It is terrifying because you are actively destroying the thing you used to be in order to become the thing you need to be.
And that complete directional reversal lands you squarely in phase 3, the most grueling, humbling phase of the entire reinvention cycle.
The grind.
You have survived the shock of the deep end. You have trusted your intuition. You have destroyed your escape routes and completely reversed your life's trajectory. You have successfully entered your new world. And your immediate reward for all this heroic effort is discovering that you are entirely insignificant.
Welcome to the grind.
Yeah.
You are a beginner all over again, and the new environment demands a toll. You are now required to pay your dues.
And to understand why this phase is universally mandatory, we really have to look back at the historical structures of medieval and early modern labor, specifically the craftsmen's guilds.
This is fascinating because it explains the sociological architecture of how humans manage hierarchy and knowledge transfer.
Precisely. Centuries ago, if you wanted to become a respected master stonemason or a master carpenter, you couldn't just read a book, pick up a hammer, and declare yourself a master.
The community would not accept you.
Not at all. To enter the trade, you had to join the guild. This required literal financial payment, your membership dues. But the real currency demanded was your time and your physical submission.
You became an apprentice, which sounds educational, but in reality, it was years of grueling menial labor.
You were doing the absolute lowest status work imaginable. You were sweeping the sawdust off the shop floor, hauling heavy buckets of water, sharpening the tools, and maintaining the fires.
The grunt work.
You were entirely subservient to the masters, performing repetitive, unglamorous tasks for years before you were ever trusted to carve a single intricate piece of stone.
And as we apply this to modern reinvention, the concept has obviously evolved away from literal financial payment, but the sociological mechanism remains perfectly intact. Paying your dues today is about generating the social and professional currency required to be accepted by the established tribe of your new field.
It is a test of submission and commitment.
Let's explore the example from the notes of the corporate CEO who abandons the boardroom to pursue a lifelong dream of entering the culinary world.
Oh, this one is so illustrative.
In their previous life, this person sat at the apex of a corporate hierarchy. They commanded hundreds of employees, made million-dollar strategic decisions, and held immense social status. But the moment they step into a professional Michelin-starred kitchen as a beginner, that previous status evaporates completely.
The kitchen is its own distinct tribe with its own brutal hierarchy and its own sacred traditions.
Yeah,
The fact that you could read a spreadsheet means absolutely nothing to a head chef during a dinner rush.
nothing at all. So this former CEO is handed a massive bag of onions and told to stand in the corner and chop them perfectly for 6 hours straight until their hands blister.
And they are ordered to stay until 2 a.m. to scrub the congealed grease off the floor mats.
They endure being sharply reprimanded by a 24-year-old sous chef who has been working the line since they were a teenager.
We also see this vividly in the arts. Think of the world's most famous comedians. Before they were selling out massive arenas and signing multi-million-dollar streaming deals, they spent a decade driving thousands of miles in broken-down cars to perform at open mic nights in dingy basements.
Right, they performed to completely empty rooms or to hostile, drunken crowds who booed them, all for the compensation of, like, a single free beer.
Now, I have to play the role of the skeptic here again, because looking at the CEO chopping onions or the talented comedian playing to an empty room, isn't this just institutional gatekeeping?
Gatekeeping. How so? If the CEO possesses elite organizational and leadership skills, shouldn't those skills allow them to bypass the floor scrubbing? It feels highly inefficient to force a seasoned, competent adult to start at the absolute bottom of the ladder just to prove a point. If you have the talent, why can't you skip the grunt work?
It is a totally logical objection if you view the process merely as the acquisition of technical skill. But paying your dues isn't primarily about learning how to chop an onion efficiently.
It's not.
No, it is a deeply ingrained psychological and sociological ritual of ego death.
Ego death. Explain the mechanism of that. Why does the tribe require the ego death?
Because the established members of that community have already bled for their positions. The sous chef spent 10 years burning their arms and missing every holiday to master their craft. When a newcomer arrives, especially one who carried high status in a different world, the tribe views them with inherent suspicion.
Right, they need to know, are you a tourist or are you a convert?
Exactly. Do you respect the sacred hardships of this craft, or do you think your past glory entitles you to a shortcut?
If the CEO walks into the kitchen and demands to manage the inventory instead of scrubbing the floor, they are signaling arrogance. They are signaling that they view the foundational work of the kitchen as beneath them.
And the tribe will immediately reject them. By willingly submitting to the lowest status work, by scrubbing the floor with meticulous care, the newcomer sends a powerful sociological signal. I respect the hierarchy of this world enough to surrender my past ego. I'm willing to suffer alongside you.
Humility is the mandatory toll for entry.
Yes. Without it, the masters will never share their true secrets with you, and you will remain a perpetual outsider.
So paying your dues is actually the process of earning the trust necessary for the tribe to finally adopt you. And while that grind is physically and emotionally exhausting, the human nervous system is an incredible machine of adaptation.
It truly is.
The blisters turn into calluses. The foreign environment slowly becomes familiar. The sheer agony of the transition begins to yield. And if you survive the deep end, and you pay the toll of humility, you cross the threshold into a profound physiological and psychological shift. Phase 4. You reach the phase where you finally hit your stride.
This represents the beautiful dissipation of the initial chaos. The cognitive load plummets, the constant anxiety fades, and your brain moves from a state of frantic survival into a state of fluid mastery.
The phrase itself gives us the perfect framework to understand this. It is drawn directly from the brutal physical reality of long-distance running.
Anyone who has ever attempted to run a significant distance understands the intense biological friction of the first few miles.
Oh yeah, it's awful.
When you begin the run, your body actively rebels against the sudden demand for exertion. Your muscles are stiff and unyielding, lactic acid begins to build up, causing a burning sensation in your legs.
And your breathing is shallow, ragged, and erratic as your lungs struggle to intake enough oxygen. Your heart rate spikes violently. It is a period of pure, uncomfortable physiological adjustment.
It is the physical manifestation of the deep end. You are fighting the environment and you are fighting your own biology.
But if you keep pushing through that initial wall of friction, a remarkable biological phenomenon occurs. The cardiovascular system adapts.
The lungs expand and the breathing regulates into a deep, steady cadence. The heart rate stabilizes. The muscles flush the lactic acid and find an incredibly efficient, synchronized rhythm.
The runner ceases to fight the pavement, the intense conscious effort fades, and the body takes over. They have found their optimal pace. They have hit their stride.
Idiomatically, this is exactly what happens in the life cycle of a reinvention. To hit your stride means you have finally achieved a state of deep comfort, quiet confidence, and high effectiveness in your new reality. The period of painful adjustment is over.
Think back to the person who moved to Tokyo, or let's use the classic example from our notes of an expat moving to Paris. The first 6 months are defined by constant, exhausting friction. You're constantly translating currency in your head, you get lost on the metro, you mispronounce words, and face daily social embarrassment. Every single interaction requires intense conscious effort.
But then, almost imperceptibly, a Tuesday arrives and you realize you aren't translating the currency anymore, you just know the value.
Right.
You order your espresso at the corner cafe and you joke with the barista in fluid French without pre-planning the sentence. You know the exact shortcut down the cobblestone street to avoid the tourist crowds. You aren't just surviving the city anymore, you are flowing with it.
The brain has habituated to the new environment. The neural pathways have solidified. You are operating from a state of subconscious competence.
Subconscious competence, that's a great way to put it.
What I find so striking about this point in the journey is the dramatic linguistic shift we've undergone today. If you look back at the vocabulary we explored in the beginning, it was violent, chaotic, and terrifying.
Very much so.
We were sinking in the deep end. We were flying blind in vibrating airplanes. We were literally burning wooden ships to trap ourselves on foreign shores. It was a language of desperation and survival.
And now, the language has smoothed out entirely.
Exactly. Now we are talking about regulated breathing, harmonious athletic rhythms, and finding a comfortable pace. The evolution of the vocabulary perfectly mirrors the calming of the nervous system. The chaos has been tamed.
You have established a new baseline of normalcy.
And once that rhythm is maintained, you arrive at the ultimate destination of the reinvention cycle. You reach a state where you are no longer a beginner, you are no longer just adapting, and you have fully come into your own.
Coming into your own is perhaps the most profound and resonant phrase in this entire lexicon. It signifies the absolute completion of the transition.
It carries such a distinct, peaceful weight. It isn't an aggressive phrase.
It's entirely organic. If we examine the imagery it evokes, it leaves behind the mechanical metaphors of aviation and the geometric metaphors of a compass. It conjures the image of a plant that has survived the harsh elements, rooted deeply in new soil, and is finally blossoming into its full, mature form. In human terms, it describes the pinnacle of psychological and professional self-actualization.
When you have come into your own, the imposter syndrome is entirely dead. You are no longer pretending to be the person who belongs in this new life. You undeniably are that person. You have forged a unique, authentic identity that perfectly fills the space you fought so hard to enter.
Consider the corporate employee who burned their boats to start an independent design agency. For years, they may have felt like they were just playing the role of a founder, desperately trying to survive the deep end.
Just flying by the seat of their pants.
Exactly. But eventually, they start mimicking other agencies. They trust their unique aesthetic. They begin setting industry trends rather than following them. They have come into their own as a true visionary.
Or the quiet, hesitant team member who's thrust into a massive leadership role.
Yeah.
Initially, they fly by the seat of their pants, making mistakes, paying their dues by managing interpersonal conflicts. But years later, they step into a boardroom with a quiet, undeniable gravity. They don't have to raise their voice to command respect. They have fully inhabited the dimensions of a leader.
This final state represents the successful synthesis of everything we have discussed. The raw courage required to jump into the deep end, the sensory intuition developed by flying by the seat of your pants, the unyielding commitment forged by burning the boats, and the deep, community-granted respect earned by paying your dues.
All of those painful ingredients have melded together to construct a fully realized, integrated version of yourself.
Which brings us to the grand, overarching architecture of what we have just explored. When we pull back and look at the sequence of these phrases, we aren't just looking at a random list of idioms. We have just outlined, step by step, the classic hero's journey.
The hero's journey. It really is.
It maps flawlessly onto the mythological structure that defines human storytelling. The hero must leave the safety of the ordinary world. They plunge into the perilous unknown of the deep end. They face trials where intellect fails, and they must rely on raw instinct.
They destroy their path backward to ensure they face the dragon.
They humble themselves as mere apprentices to learn the magic of the new world. They find their power, their rhythm, and finally they return transformed, having achieved mastery, fully coming into their own.
And this brings the entire conversation right back to you, the listener. If you are sitting there contemplating a terrifying leap, or if you are currently treading water in the middle of a chaotic transition, the reason we took this deep dive wasn't just to give you an English lesson.
No, not at all.
It was to give you the psychological framework to master your own narrative.
Because when you're in the middle of a massive life transition, it is an incredibly isolating experience. The internal chaos, the imposter syndrome, the exhaustion, it is profoundly difficult to explain to friends or family who are still standing safely on the shore.
But by internalizing this specific, visceral vocabulary, you gain the power to articulate your own evolution. You can take the messy, chaotic reality of your life and give it a structure.
Exactly.
You can sit in a job interview and explain that a gap in your resume was you intentionally diving into the deep end to force a radical adaptation. You can explain to a partner that your current exhaustion is just the mandatory toll of paying your dues. Having the words prevents you from being swallowed by the chaos. It allows you to become the author of your own reinvention.
To that end, we want to leave you with a challenge to examine your own history. Every person listening has a unique map of these moments. Look back at your life and ask yourself, when was the last time you were forced to fly by the seat of your pants? And how did your raw intuition save you when the data failed?
Think about a time you entered a new space, maybe a new hobby, a new relationship, or a new industry, and you felt the crushing, ego-deflating weight of having to pay your dues from the absolute bottom. And most importantly, could you recall the exact beautiful moment when the friction finally vanished, the breathing regulated, and you realized you'd hit your stride?
Those memories are the absolute proof of your capacity for transformation. But considering the entire life cycle we've unpacked today, there is one final lingering question that we must address. It's a provocative thought that challenges the very concept of arrival.
What happens after the journey ends?
Exactly. We have established that coming into your own is the triumphant conclusion of the transition. You have achieved mastery. The imposter syndrome is gone. You are completely, blissfully comfortable. But is human nature designed to remain in a state of static comfort? Does the hero's journey ever permanently end?
Oh, that is a terrifying thought, because comfort is just another word for the shallow end of the pool.
Precisely. The ultimate advanced lesson of reinvention might be the realization that true mastery is cyclical. Once you have fully come into your own and your new life becomes easy and predictable, that environment slowly morphs back into a shallow end. And it begs the question, does achieving mastery simply mean you are finally strong enough and rested enough to seek out a brand new, terrifyingly deep pool, burn a completely new fleet of boats on a foreign shore, and begin the painful, beautiful, chaotic process of reinvention all over again?
A profound reminder that growth never truly stops. So the next time you find yourself staring at the ceiling, feeling that familiar itch of restlessness, dreaming about blowing your life up in the best way possible, just remember, the deep end is always waiting.